What's up guys, I'm James and welcome to BootWizard. Today we're going to be doing an unboxing and a little review of the brand new Nemeziz 0.1. Now you might be sat there thinking, but James, you reviewed this like a year ago in that wonderful messy colorway you've got, and you said it was amazing and you said we should all go out and buy it, but then you spent 3 videos telling us how all the other boots are better. You're very confused about this Nemeziz. Well, Adidas have changed the name. We no longer have the Nemeziz 19.1 and the Nemeziz 19 Plus. We have the Nemeziz 0.1 and the Nemeziz Plus, and that's come with a little tweak in the upper. Now, does this justify a name change? Is the boot any better? Is it worse? Is it still a boot that I really love? Is it still one that I recommend? Is it still one that you could potentially go out and buy? All of those questions and more coming right up. The answers to all of those questions and more coming right up. Get subscribed to the channel, like the video, and comment down below what you think of the brand new atmospheric pack Nemeziz, and let's jump straight into the review. We will start with the upper because that's where the changes are and that's where all the fun is. So you still get the torsion tape upper. So what that is these big strips of tape which are based on medical tape that run around the boot. Now, this particular concept's been present on the Nemeziz line since it launched with the Nemeziz 17 range, but it's been refined and changed and renamed here and there. And this, for me, is by far the best iteration. And it's basically just reduced the amount of tape and just run it in a much simpler fashion with the least number of crossovers that you can possibly get. So what that means is that this is an incredibly barefoot feeling on the ball, and that's because the tape itself is the upper. There's basically no lining. All it is these big strips of tape, which, yeah, okay, they cross over areas here which give you slightly thicker points, but you don't notice that when you are wearing them, when you're striking the ball, and it gives you such a raw sensation on the football boot. Now, this used to be by far, well, maybe not by far, but these used to be the thinnest, most barefoot touch on the ball on the market, in my opinion. That's now been taken by the X Ghosted, but this still gives you a really barefoot, really sharp feeling on the ball. It's different to what you get from the Ghosted, but still barefoot and still excellent in my view. Now, of course, something that we do need to talk about is, of course, all of these little gold areas here. So you can see here, this section here, these lines that run just up here, these are all new control elements that have been added to the Nemeziz. And the idea here is to basically give the upper of the boot a little bit more texture and make it less slick. So a problem that many people have had previously with the Nemeziz line is that the upper has been a little bit on the slick side. Now, that's not something that I personally have had a problem with, but it is worth noting that I believe the top coating on this Nemeziz is actually different to the coating you get on especially that initial messy colorway I had. It's a little bit thicker and it seems to just take away any of that gritty sensation that was initially on the top of the Nemeziz. This is now smooth apart from the areas that have those additional grip elements added to them. The rest of it is very smooth. That's not the case with the previous Nemeziz, in my opinion, where there was kind of a sandpapery, gritty effect, which wasn't going to give you incredible touch on the ball, but you know what? It wasn't bad, and it was certainly enough for me to not describe the boot as slick. This boot feels very much like it needs these elements. And the elements are there, thankfully. They're, of course, positioned in classic football boot positions, the thing that we've heard a million times from all the companies. Oh, we did some research and we found out that these are the areas that people contact the ball in. We've had it this year from the GT, we've had it from the Takela V3 Pro. Everyone's done 3D modeling to work out where the highest contact areas are. We could have all told them that. We've played football. It's been the same all throughout time, and basically the simplest way to look at it, especially from this boot, is that it's very similar to what you get from the Adidas LZ. So the LZ1 with its lethal zones, you basically get the same zones here, they're just not quite as concentrated. So you get a little bit on the toe area, you get some through this striking area here, some on the instep as kind of like a pass pad, and then a little bit on kind of like the dribble zone on the outside of the boot here. It's pretty straightforward. Does it make a huge difference? Not really. It does a job, it does make the boot less slick, but is it going to benefit your touch and feel on the ball? Is it going to make you control the ball better? Not really. It's just something to stop the boot being less slick, and I suppose you can say it does that. And realistically, that is the only change that you're getting on this Nemeziz 0.1 and Nemeziz Plus model. There's nothing else. You're not getting anything else. You're getting a few elements stuck to the top of an existing upper, which is super barefoot. Thankfully, I have to say that it hasn't taken away from the barefoot feel too much. If you catch it occasionally, you can feel it a bit more solid feeling and less barefoot feeling, but it's not a huge detriment in my opinion. And it also hasn't done, one thing I was also worried about was that it would make the upper that little bit stiffer, because this is already a fairly stiff upper out of the box and you do need to break it in over time. But because of the way that they've put these elements on in lines, so they aren't a solid item, they're in lines that run all the way through the boot, that means that the boot can bend and flex as normal. So no major problems with that either, but the coating that is on the top, as with the previous generations, it takes a little bit to break it in. With the changes out of the way, something that has stayed the same is of course the Soleplate. So we'll flip it over and take a look. You get the split sole design, which isn't bad. The one thing that it does do that I'm not sure I've actually mentioned before is it does kind of make the boot a little bottom heavy. You can feel that when you're wearing it. The boot as a whole is not that light. I actually drop it on the scales for you right now, and this new Nemeziz 0.1 doesn't make a huge difference in terms of the weight from the previous gen. Comes in at 210 grams. So it's not insanely different, and it's not actually that heavy, but most of the weight seems to sit in this bottom like 10th of the boot all the way through the sole plate. So it does mean that when you are running, it is noticeable that that's where the weight sits, particularly with the fact that the upper is so thin and so barefoot and just feels that bit more, that bit lighter. I have also heard it argued that the Nemeziz sole plate is actually that little bit too stiff. Now, this hasn't been a problem for me personally. I don't have an issue with it, but I can absolutely see where people are coming from. This is very stiff through the heel and midfoot, so I find it to be quite responsive and I don't have an issue there. But sometimes, you know, it's springy in the forefoot, which is good, but maybe is it just because it's a little bit too stiff overall? Again, not an issue for me personally, but I can definitely see where people are coming from. And if you want something that has that little bit more flex and is a little bit more forgiving, this is not going to be the boot for you. In terms of the actual traction, there is a change up here from what we got from the previous generations, where you've gone for these primarily conical and oval studs. So you can see here, we've got conical here, oval here, and then this kind of bumped triangular stud through the front. This has, I might be stretching and pulling at straws here, but it does have some elements of the traction of the Gambatrax outsole that Messi has previously had on his specific versions. So if you check out a Messi specific boot, pretty much most of them from around 2014, 2015 onwards, they have the Gambatrax Messi outsole. And I love it. And the traction you get from the studs on that is reasonably similar to this. And I might just be pulling that out of my head because I really want it to be similar, because that's one of my favorite sole plates of all time. Basically, the longer studs with a slightly rounded shape kind of give you that feeling. You get good purchase in the ground. This does work on AG pitches, although I would argue that some of these lower profile conical studs are a little bit too long and they dig in a little bit too much for an AG pitch. But of all the boots that you can get away with kind of going FG, AG, this would be a solid option to use on both ground types, even if my preference or my recommendation is to definitely use this as an FG boot, not an AG boot. Pricing and value for money. Is it worth picking up this brand new Nemeziz 0.1 or Nemeziz Plus with the upper texturing instead of picking up an older colorway which may be on sale? No, absolutely not. So this 0.1 model retails for £180, which is standard Adidas 0.1 model pricing, which isn't too bad, but realistically, the upper texturing doesn't do enough to justify buying this particular boot as against buying a 19.1, which you can get from some places at around £100, €100 even, if you're willing to look around, and that's absolutely what I would recommend doing. There's just no point in picking up the new version with the elements. Unless, of course, you're planning on picking up this boot specifically for its looks, because let's be honest, this is an unbelievable looking boot. The half and half with the white, black and gold, which is such a good color combination. Like, this is the best looking Nemeziz so far, without question, in my opinion. I love this. And the atmospheric pack, if you want to pick this up, go for it. It's just such a good looking boot, and especially when you compare it to the pack that came after it, that purple thing. This is the way to go, ladies and gentlemen. If I've got a criticism, it's probably going to be this Nemeziz branding that runs down the side of the instep of the boot here, where it just says Nemeziz in big letters. I could have done without that, but overall, I am a huge fan of this boot. Finally, fit and comfort, and for sizing, I would advise going true to size in the Nemeziz, or if you want to try and get a particularly tight fit, you might be able to get away with going down half a size, but it's definitely not my recommendation. In terms of width, this is actually a surprisingly wide boot. It has a good amount of width all the way through, and especially in the toe box area. So if you have kind of a medium wide foot, then this is definitely worth checking out. If you liked or had the previous X19 generation and that foot shape really worked for you, you've basically got exactly the same thing here, and this is well worth checking out for wide-footed people. There's no extra padding, lining, foam or anything like that on the inside of the boot to kind of bump the comfort up, so you really are just left with the tape, and that wraps around my foot quite nicely, and I don't find this to be an uncomfortable boot to wear, and for my particular foot type, this just fits. It just works so well for me, and I find it to be quite comfortable, but I wouldn't say it's one of the most comfortable boots around. And as I said previously, it does feel that little bit bottom heavy. So a small tweak here to the Nemeziz, and I'm really pleased that what Adidas have done is not release this as a brand new Nemeziz 20 model for basically no reason. That shuffle to just Plus and 0.1 seems more in line with what Adidas are doing as a whole within their brand right now, and rather than them trying to rebrand this as a brand new boot. Brand. So I think that's excellent to see, instead of these stupid required updates because after 12 months we must have a new boot. So it's a nice little update. It doesn't do a huge amount, and you can pick this up, you can pick up another Nemeziz, and you're still going to enjoy both boots pretty much equally. I will probably be sticking with this one purely because of how it looks. My God, black, white and gold. But yeah, it's just all about colorway. So pick up whichever one you like the looks of. Let me know down in the comments, what do you think? Do you think this was done in order to compete with the Phantom GT? And if you do, or if you don't, you can check out a video that's coming soon, or is already up, depending on what order I put these up in, where I compare the upper on the Nemeziz to the upper of the Phantom GT Elite. So get subscribed to check that out. Remember to like this video if you enjoyed it, and of course, I hope you have enjoyed this video, and I will see you soon.